I'm reading Subpart E of the Truth in Lending Act out of the Code of Federal Regulations. And I'm starting in section 1026.31, the general rules. A, which is titled Relation to Other Subparts in this part. The requirements and limitations of this subpart are in addition to and not in lieu of those contained in other subparts of this part. B, the form of disclosures being discussed. The creditor shall make the disclosures required by the subpart clearly and conspicuously in writing in a form that the consumer can keep. The disclosures required by the subpart may be provided to the consumer in electronic form, subject to compliance with the consumer consent and other applicable provisions of e-sign. C, the timing of the disclosure. Disclosures for high-cost mortgages. Number 1 is the first disclosure to be discussed. The creditor shall furnish the disclosures required by 1026.32 at least 3 business days prior to consummation or account opening of a high-cost mortgage as defined in 1026.32. So this is prior to consummation or account opening, 3 days that is. These are not early disclosures. 1. Change in terms. After complying with this paragraph C1 and prior to consummation or account opening, if the creditor changes any term that makes the disclosures inaccurate, new disclosures shall be provided in accordance with the requirements of this part. Subpart. Roman numeral 2, telephone disclosures. A creditor may provide new disclosures required by paragraph C1, Roman numeral 1 of this section by telephone if the consumer initiates the change and if prior to a consummation or account opening, 1. The creditor provides new written disclosures, and B. The creditor and consumer and creditor sign a statement that the new disclosures were provided by telephone at least 3 business days prior to consummation or account opening as applicable. Roman numeral 3, the consumer's waiver of waiting period before consummation or account opening. The consumer may, after receiving the disclosures required by this paragraph C1, modify or waive the 3-day waiting period between delivery of those disclosures and consummation or account opening if the consumer determines that the extension of credit is needed to meet a bona fide personal financial emergency. To modify or waive the right, the consumer shall give the creditor a dated written statement that describes the emergency, specifically modifies or waives the waiting period, and bears the signature of all consumers entitled to the waiting period. Printed forms for this purpose are prohibited, except where creditors are permitted to use printed forms pursuant to 1026.23E2. So that's all under Roman numeral 3, consumers' waiver of waiting period before consummation or account opening within the timing of the disclosure for high-cost mortgages. Moving on to number 2, disclosures for reverse mortgages. The creditor shall furnish the disclosures required under 1026.33 at least 3 business days prior to consummation of a closed-end credit transaction or, Roman numeral 2, the first transaction under an open-end credit plan. So this is at least 3 days prior to consummation again, or before the first transaction on an open-end credit plan. Disclosures for reverse mortgages. So it's completely not applicable to high-cost mortgages. Now I'm in letter D. So the basis of disclosures and use of estimates. 1. Legal obligation. And before going into this, I'm going to say that I would expect that under the subpart E, the only disclosures that are being discussed are those 2, high-cost mortgages and reverse mortgages. D. Basis of disclosures and use of estimates, legal obligation. Number 1, disclosure shall reflect the terms of the legal obligation between the parties. 2, estimates. If any information necessary for an accurate disclosure is unknown to the creditor shall make the disclosure based on the best information reasonably available at the time the disclosure is provided, and shall clearly state that the disclosure is an estimate. Per diem interest. For a transaction in which a portion of the interest is determined on a per diem basis and collected at consummation, any disclosure affected by the per diem interest shall be considered accurate if the disclosure is based on the information known to the creditor at the time that the disclosure documents are prepared. Letter E now, moving on about both of these general disclosures, is how to disclose when there's multiple creditors or multiple consumers. If a transaction involves more than one creditor, only one set of disclosures shall be given, and the creditors shall agree among themselves which creditor must comply with the requirements that this part imposes on any or all of them. If there is more than one consumer, the disclosures may be made to any consumer who is primarily liable on the obligation. If the transaction is rescindable under 1026.15 or 1026.23, however, the disclosure shall be made to each consumer who has the right to rescind. It's rather odd that they stuck that in there. It could be made to one, but if they have the right to rescind, it should be made to both. Is that what I'm understanding? Letter F. Effective subsequent events. If a disclosure becomes inaccurate because of an event that occurs after the creditor delivers the required disclosures, the inaccuracy is not a violation of Reg Z, although new disclosures may be required for mortgages covered by 1026.32 under paragraph C of this section. And then you have comma a couple other different areas like 1026.9C, 1026.19, and 1026.20. Letter G, under the general rules for these disclosures for high-cost mortgages and reverse mortgages. The accuracy of the annual percentage rate. For purposes of Section 1026.32, the annual percentage rate shall be considered accurate and may be used to determine whether a transaction is covered by Section 1026.32. If it is accurate according to the requirements and within the tolerances under Section 1026.22, closed-end credit transactions, or 1026.6A for open-end credit plans, the finance charge tolerances for rescission under 1026.23G or H shall not apply for this purpose. Letter H. Speak of the devil. Corrections and unintentional violations. Alright, so it's saying, before I go into that, it's saying the finance charge tolerances for rescission under Section 1026.32G or H shall not apply for this purpose. Got it, I think. H. Corrections and unintentional violations. A creditor or assignee in a high-cost mortgage as defined in 1026.32A who, when acting in good faith, failed to comply with any requirement under Section 129 of the Act will not be deemed to have violated such requirement if the creditor or assignee satisfies either of the following sets of conditions. 1. Roman numeral 1, within 30 days of consummation or account opening and prior to the institution of any action the consumer is notified of or discovers a violation. Roman numeral 2, appropriate restitution is made within a reasonable time, and Roman numeral 3, within a reasonable time, whatever adjustments are necessary are made to the loan or credit plan to either, at the choice of the consumer, make the loan or credit plan satisfy the requirements, change the terms of the loan or credit plan in a manner beneficial to the consumer so that the loan or credit plan will no longer be a high-cost mortgage, or 2, Roman numeral 1, within 60 days of the creditor's discovery or receipt of notification of an unintentional violation or bona fide error and prior to the institution of any action, the consumer is notified of the compliance failure. Roman numeral 2, appropriate restitution is made within a reasonable time, and Roman numeral 3, within a reasonable time, whatever adjustments are necessary are made to the loan or credit plan to either, at the choice of the consumer, A, make the loan or credit plan satisfy the requirements, or B, change the terms of the loan or credit plan in a manner beneficial to the consumer so that the loan or credit plan will no longer be a high-cost mortgage. Okay, 1026.32, requirements for high-cost mortgages. Do we have time to go directly into this? Let's hope. Coverage. 1. The requirements of this section apply to a high-cost mortgage, which is any consumer credit transaction that is secured by a consumer's principal dwelling other than as provided in paragraph A2 of this section, and in which the APR applicable to the transaction, as determined in accordance with paragraph A3 of this section, will exceed the average prime offer rate as defined in 1026-35A2 for a comparable transaction by more than A, B, or C. A, 6.5 percentage points for a first lien transaction other than as described in paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1B of this section, or B, 8.5 percentage points exceeding the APR for a first lien transaction if the dwelling is personal property and the loan amount is less than $50,000, or 8.5 percentage points in excess of APOR for a subordinate lien transaction, or Roman numeral 2, the transaction's total points and fees as described in paragraphs B1 and 2 of this section will exceed A or B, A, which is 5% of the total loan amount for a transaction with a amount of $20,000 or more. The $20,000 figure shall be adjusted annually on January 1 by the annual percentage change in the Consumer Price Index that was reported on the preceding June 1, or B, the lesser of 8%. And we're talking about total points and fees will exceed the lesser of 8% of the total loan amount, or $1,000 for a transaction with a loan amount of less than $20,000. The $1,000 and $20,000 figures will be adjusted annually as I described before. Roman numeral 3, under the terms of the loan contract or open-end credit agreement, the creditor can change a prepayment penalty as defined under paragraph B6 of this section more than 36 months after consummation or account opening, or prepayment penalties that can exceed in total more than 2% of the amount prepaid. 2. Exemptions. This section does not apply to the following: a reverse mortgage transaction subject to 1026.33, which we'll go into next. Roman numeral 2, a transaction to finance the initial construction of a dwelling. Number 3, Roman numeral 3, a transaction originated by the housing finance agency where the housing finance agency is the creditor for the transaction. Or 4, a transaction originated pursuant to the United States Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Section 502 Direct Loan Program. Number 3, determination of APR. For purposes of paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, a creditor shall determine the APR for closed or open-end credit transaction based on the following. That's 1 through 3. Roman numeral 1. For a transaction in which the annual percentage rate will not vary during the term of the loan or credit plan, the interest rate in effect as of the date the interest rate for the transaction is set. 2. For a transaction in which the interest rate may vary during the term of the loan or credit plan in accordance with an index, the interest rate that results from adding the maximum margin permitted at any time during the term of the loan or credit plan to the value of the index rate in effect as of the date the interest rate for the transaction is set, or the introductory interest rate, whichever is greater. And 3, for a transaction in which the interest rate may or will vary during the term of the loan or credit plan other than a transaction described in paragraph A3, Roman numeral 2 of this section, the maximum interest rate that may be imposed during the term of the loan or credit plan. Letter B, definitions. For purposes of this subpart, the following definitions apply. 1. In connection with the closed-end credit transaction, points and fees means the following fees or charges that are known at or before consummation. Roman numeral 1, all items included in the finance charge under 1026.4a and b, except that the following items are excluded, which is interest or the time price differential. B, any premium or other charge imposed in connection with any federal or state agency program for any guarantee or insurance that protects the creditor against the consumer's default or other credit loss. And lastly, C, for any guarantee or insurance that protects the creditor against the consumer's default or other credit loss, and that is not in connection with any federal or state agency program. 1. If the premium or other charge is payable after consummation, the entire amount of such premium or other charge, or 2. If the premium or other charge is payable at or before consummation, the portion of any such premium or other charge that is not in excess of the amount payable under policies in effect at the time of origination under Section 203C2A of the National Housing Act, provided that the premium or charge is required to be refundable on a pro rata basis, and the refund is automatically issued upon notification of the satisfaction of the underlying mortgage loan. So, where is this 1 and 2 coming from? What is this one? Oh, it's 1 and 2 under C. Okay, so we're talking about guarantee insurance, and I don't know if we're talking about MIP or PMI, but we're talking about fees that contribute to the points and fees definition. So there's more here. There's D and E and F at least. D, any bona fide third-party charge not retained by the creditor, loan originator, or any affiliate of either, unless the charge is required to be included in points and fees under paragraph B1, Roman numeral 1C, Roman numeral 3, or Roman numeral 4 of this section. And E, up to 2 bona fide discount points paid by the consumer in connection with the transaction if the interest rate without any discount does not exceed 1 or 2. 1. The APOR as defined in 1026.35A2 or more than 1 percentage point, or for purposes of paragraph A1, paragraph 2, or Roman numeral 2 of this section, for transactions that are secured by personal property, the average rate for a loan insured under Title I of the National Housing Act by more than 1 percentage point. And F, which is more fees that are considered in the points and fees definition. If no discount points have been excluded under paragraph earlier of this section, then up to 1 bona fide discount point paid by the consumer in connection with the transaction if the interest rate without any discount does not exceed APOR by more than 2 percentage points, or for the purposes of paragraph A1 Roman numeral 2 of this section, for transactions that are covered by personal property, the average rate for a loan insured under Title I of the National Housing Act by more than 2 percentage points. Which I feel like is a non-real estate secured transaction. So why would a non-real estate secured transaction be insured under Title I of the National Housing Act? I just think this could be a little bit easier to understand. Regardless, Roman numeral 2, all compensation paid directly or indirectly by a consumer or creditor to a loan originator as defined in 1026.36A1 that can be contributed to that transaction at the time the interest rate is set, unless that compensation is paid by a consumer to a mortgage broker as defined in 1026.36A2 and already has been included in points and fees under paragraph B1 Roman numeral 1 of this section. And B, the compensation is paid by a mortgage broker as defined in the later section to a loan originator that is an employee of the mortgage broker. C, and this is all under compensation paid by the consumer or creditor to a loan originator. B, the compensation is paid by a mortgage broker as defined in 1026.36A2 to a loan originator that is an employee of the mortgage broker. Or C, that compensation is paid by a creditor to a loan originator that is an employee of the creditor. Or D, that compensation is paid by a retailer of manufactured homes to its employee. Roman numeral 3, all items listed in 1026.4C7 other than amounts held for future payment of taxes, unless the charge is reasonable, the creditor receives no direct or indirect compensation in connection with the charge, and the charge is not paid to an affiliate of the creditor. Roman numeral 4, and these are all what? Roman numerals under, trying to figure this out. Where's Roman numeral 1? Okay, Roman numeral 1 is all items included under the finance charge. Alright, so we got past that section. We got to 2, which was compensation, then 3, and now going into 4. 3 was items listed in 1026.4C7, other than amounts held for future payment of taxes, which, I'm sorry, I cannot actually recall what that was, all the way back in 1026.4 in the definition section, I believe. Unless the charge is reasonable, the creditor receives no credit or indirect compensation in connection with the charge, and the charge is not paid to an affiliate of the creditor. Roman numeral 4, under other things that are part of the points and fees definition, premiums or other charges payable at or before consummation for any credit life, credit disability, credit unemployment, or credit property insurance, or any other life, accidental life, health, or loss of income insurance for which the creditor is a beneficiary, or any payments directly or indirectly for any debt cancellation or suspension agreement or contract. Roman numeral 5, the maximum prepayment penalty as defined in paragraph B6, Roman numeral 1 of this section, that may be charged or collected under the terms of the mortgage loan, and Roman numeral 6, the total prepayment penalty as defined under that paragraph, or Roman numeral 2 of this section, as applicable, incurred by the consumer if the consumer refinances the existing mortgage loan or terminates the existing open-end credit plan in connection with obtaining a new mortgage loan with the current holder of an existing plan, loan or plan, a servicer acting on behalf of the current holder or an affiliate of either. Number 2. In connection with an open-end credit plan, points and fees means the following fees or charges that are known at or before account opening. And I'm looking at this and wondering if it's the same thing that I just read. So, let's go with I. This is items under the finance charge except for time price, interest or time price differential, which was already explained. Premium for, I guess, PMI, or for any guarantee or insurance, PMI again. Not PMI, because it's not in connection with any federal or state agency program, within which we have 1 and 2. D is bona fide third-party charge not retained by the creditor, loan originator, or an affiliate of either unless the charge is required to be included in points of fees. E, up to 2 bona fide discount points, or 1 discount point payable by the consumer in connection with the transaction, provided that no discount points have been excluded. Roman numeral 2 now is all compensation paid by the consumer to the loan originator, and I would believe this is all the same junk underneath of it, A through D. And then Roman numeral 3, any items listed in 1026.4C7, which I can't recall again what that stands for within the definition section of this regulation. Roman numeral 4, premiums paid for charges payable for credit life, credit disability, credit employment, credit property insurance, or other debt cancellations, suspension agreement or contract. Roman numeral 5, maximum prepayment penalty. 6, the total prepayment penalty. And 7, any fees charged for participation in an open-end credit plan payable at or before account opening as described in 1026.4C4. And Roman numeral 8, any transaction fee, including any minimum fee or per transaction fee that will be charged for a draw on a credit line where the creditor must assume that the consumer will make at least 1 draw during the term of the plan. And now we're in 3, bona fide discount points. Closed-end credit. The term, so I guess we're back to definitions. The third definition being bona fide discount point for Roman numeral 1 closed-end credit. The term bona fide discount point means an amount equal to 1% of the loan amount paid by the consumer that reduces the interest rate or time price differential applicable to the transaction based on a calculation that is consistent with established industry practices for determining the amount of reduction in the interest rate or time price differential appropriate for the amount of discount points paid by the consumer. Roman numeral 2, bona fide discount points under open-end credit. The term bona fide discount point means an amount equal to 1% of the credit limit for the plan when the account is open, paid by the consumer, and that reduces the interest rate or time price differential applicable to the transaction based on the calculation that is consistent with established industry practices for determining the amount of reduction in the interest rate or time price differential appropriate for the amount of discount points paid by the consumer. See comment 32B3 Roman numeral 1-1 for number 1 for additional guidance in determining whether a discount point is bona fide. Further definitions is open-end credit. Roman numeral 2. The total loan amount under open-end credit. The total loan amount for an open-end credit plan is the credit limit for the plan when the account is open. Definition of affiliate means any company that controls is controlled by or under common control with another company as set forth in the Bank Holding Company Act of 1956. Prepayment penalty. For a closed-end credit transaction means a charge imposed for paying all or part of the transaction's principal before the date in which the principal is due, other than a waived bona fide third-party charge that the creditor imposes if the consumer prepays all of the transaction's principal sooner than 36 months after the consummation provided. However, that interest charge consistent with the monthly interest accrual amortization method is not a prepayment penalty for extensions of credit insured by the Federal Housing Administration that are consummated before January 21st, 2015. Open-end credit definition of prepayment penalty means a charge imposed by the creditor if the consumer terminates the open-end credit plan prior to the end of its term, other than a waived bona fide third-party charge that the creditor imposes if the consumer terminates the open-end credit plan sooner than 36 months after account opening. C. Disclosures. In addition to other disclosures required by this part, in a mortgage subject to this section, the creditor shall disclose the following in conspicuous type size. 1. Notices. The following statement: you are not required to complete this agreement merely because you have received these disclosures or have signed a loan application. If you obtain this loan, the lender will have a mortgage on your home. You could lose your home and any money you have put into it if you do not meet your obligations under the loan. 2. Annual percentage rate. The annual percentage rate. 3. Regular payment. Minimum periodic payment example of a balloon payment. For a closed-end credit transaction, the amount of the regular monthly or other periodic payment and the amount of any balloon payment provided in the credit contract if permitted under paragraph D1 of this section. A regular payment disclosed under this paragraph shall be treated as accurate if it is based on an amount borrowed that is deemed accurate and is disclosed under paragraph C5 of this section. I'm just looking at this. We're still talking about prepayment penalties, but this time under open-end credit, and we just snuck right into the notices for prepayment penalties, and I guess definitions applying to that notice. So, Roman numeral 2 for an open-end credit plan A, an example showing the first minimum periodic payment for the draw period and the first minimum periodic payment for any repayment period and the balance outstanding at the beginning of any repayment period. The example must be based on the following assumptions. 1. The consumer borrows the full credit line as disclosed in paragraph C5 of this section at account opening and does not obtain any additional extensions of credit. 2. The consumer makes only minimum periodic payments during the draw period and any repayment period. And 3. The annual percentage rate used to calculate the example payments remains the same during the day draw period and any repayment period. The creditor must provide minimum periodic payment example based on the APR for the plan as described in paragraph C2 of this section, except that an introductory APR applies. The creditor must use the rate that will apply to the plan after the introductory rate expires. B. If the credit contract provides for a balloon payment under the plan as permitted under paragraph D1 of this section, a disclosure that the fact and the example showing the amount of the balloon payment based on the assumptions described in paragraph C3, Roman numeral 2A of this section. C. A statement that the example payments show the first minimum periodic payments at the current annual percentage rate if the consumer borrows the maximum credit available when the account is open and does not obtain any additional extensions of credit, or a substantially similar statement. D. A statement that the example payments are not the consumer's actual payments and that the actual minimum periodic payments will depend on the amount the consumer borrows, the interest rate applicable to that period, and whether the consumer pays more than the required minimum periodic payment, or a substantially similar statement. Number 4, variable rate. For variable rate transactions, a statement that the interest rate and the monthly payment may increase and the amount of a single maximum monthly payment based on the maximum interest rate required to be included in the contract by 1026.30. Amount borrowed, credit limit. Number 5. In the notice section for open-end credit, prepayment penalty disclosure. For a closed-end credit transaction, the total amount the consumer will borrow as reflected by the face amount on the note, where the amount borrowed includes finance charges that are not prohibited under section 1026.34A10. That fact shall be stated grouped together with the disclosure of the amount borrowed. The disclosure of the amount borrowed shall be treated as accurate if it is not more than $100 above or below the amount required to be disclosed. Roman numeral 2, under amount borrowed, credit limit for open-end credit plans is time, the credit limit for a plan when the account is opened. Limitations. D. A high-cost mortgage shall not include the following terms: balloon payment 1 Roman numeral I, except as provided in D1 Roman numeral 2 and 3 of this section of payment schedule, with a payment that is more than 2 times the regular periodic payment. Exceptions being that the limitations to a mortgage transaction with a payment schedule is adjusted to the seasonal or regular income of the consumer. B. A loan with maturity of 12 months or less if the purpose of the loan is a bridge loan connected with the acquisition or construction of a dwelling intended to become a consumer's principal dwelling. Or C. A loan that meets the criteria set forth in 1026.43 F1 Roman numeral 1 through 6 and 1026.43 F2, or the conditions set forth in 1026.43 E6. Yet for open-end credit plans, if the terms of an open-end credit plan provide for a repayment period during which no further draws may be taken, the limitations in paragraph D1I of this section do not apply to any adjustment in the regular periodic payment that results solely from the credit plan transition from the draw period to the repayment period. If the terms of an open-end credit plan do not provide for any repayment period, the limitations of paragraph D1I of this section apply to all periods of the credit plan. Number 2, negative amortization. A payment schedule with regular periodic payments that cause the principal balance to increase. Number 3, advance payments. A payment schedule that consolidates more than 2 periodic payments and pays them in advance from the proceeds. Number 4, increased interest rate. An increase in the interest rate after default. Number 5, rebates. A refund calculated by the method less favorable than the actuarial method as defined by Section 933D of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1992 for rebates and interest arising from a loan acceleration due to default. 6, prepayment penalties as defined in B6 of this section. 7 is reserved. 8, acceleration of debt, a debt feature that permits the creditor to accelerate the indebtedness by terminating the high-cost mortgage in advance of the original maturity date and the demand repayment of the entire outstanding balance except in the following circumstances. 1 through 3. There is a fraud or material misrepresentation by the consumer in connection with the loan or open-end credit agreement. 2, the consumer fails to meet the repayment terms of the agreement for any outstanding balance that results in a default in payment under the loan, or 3, there is any action or inaction by the consumer that adversely affects the creditor's security for the loan or any right of the creditor in such security. So I don't know if that notice has anything to do with a prepayment penalty, as it's required under a high-cost mortgage, or if it's just a notice for a high-cost mortgage. But at any rate, we do know that it needs to be disclosed 3 days prior to origination. Before going into 1026.33 requirements for reverse mortgages, I'm going to take a break.